to the cloud. All right, perfect. There we go. It was hidden inside this menu since I'm sharing my screen. So we should see it blinking now. There we go. We're perfect. So now we're starting live. So yes. So again, as we're going through this meeting, feel free to ask questions. And this is really it for the slides. And I'm just going to jump in and start showing the interface. And what I'll do here is you'll actually see, I'll start with Carbon Black interface, just so that you guys understand what is going on. Because I think it's a lot easier when you're looking at a dashboard and building out a dashboard to see it, to see where the data is coming from, so you understand why it's working and how it's working. Sorry, here I'm moving screens around so I can see if someone asks a question on chat. All right. So inside of the dashboard, this is the typical view that most users are going to see for Carbon Black, and it's just that high level. So the security analyst, when they comes in, our whole purpose is to go through and give them high level information of what is going on. And again, we're not going to go into this a lot today, but it's just to go through and understand what the data is that we're sending over to the dashboard. And today we're only going to focus on 2 dashboards from VMware. We're only going to be focusing on the Carbon Black Defense, which is, think of it as the next gen antivirus. And then we're going to be looking at the Threat Hunter, which is the EDR recording functionality. But we have additional things, especially from VMware, so you can go through and understand all the VMs, understand vulnerabilities, tie into NSX. There's a lot of other options and dashboards that we have built into Splunk, just because, as you guys are aware, Splunk is excellent at consuming all this data. So we'll go through and give you guys both the raw data, and we'll give you the high summarized data so that you can go through and make your own correlations and additional dashboards as you're moving through. So what I want to start with is just so you can understand what a policy is, because that's going to be one of the things that we see when we look at the dashboards. So I'm going to click on policies, and I'm just going to jump on an example policy here, and then click on prevention. So this is where you can go through and set what do you want to block, or what do you want to notify on when there's some process running from the next gen antivirus side. And what's really cool about the way this works and where it ties in with Carbon Black is we record data for the last 30 days. So when we're popping that data over to Splunk, it's going to be those raw events. So it's going to be going through and say, this is the process that's running. Here's the command line arguments that's tossed to the process. Here's the port, the protocol, all that additional metadata that goes with it. So who signed it? Who's, when was the last cert issued? Is the cert still valid? All those things are all additional attributes that are going to be part of those logs that we're pumping over. So what I want to show here is just an example of going through. If I wanted to tweak this and then decide that I was going to go through and do a terminate process, I'm going to click on execute as a fileless script. So with this, what it's going to do is it's going to go through and look at that data that we've stored the last 30 days. And it's going to go through and say, you know what, if you turn this on and terminate like you have, you actually would have affected 30 different events over 2 different devices. So when you click on this, this is just so you can start seeing some of that data out there that we're pumping for you. It automatically creates the query, and then it actually goes through and starts showing you that metadata. So this is in here where I could go through and do additional tasks or things to it. So if I wanted to dismiss the alert, if I needed to modify the alert, all of that detail is here for you automatically out the gate. So what I'm going to do is actually kind of look at a vulnerability. So I spun off some vulnerabilities, so I think that makes it easier to go through and look at the data and look at the dashboards. So what we're going to look at here is I'm just going to click and I'm going to say I want to look at the process tree. Before I do that, I do want to show you, these are our techniques. So think of them as tags. So we're going to go through and tag these processes. So when you're using it in Splunk or however you guys are looking at the data, even if you're just using raw APIs, you want to have additional metadata so you understand what it is. So I know that this process was doing it hit the bypass policy rule. It was running another app. It had some packed code in it. There was a policy deny, so it says, hey, I was going to deny it. And then when you start pulling in some of the MITRE ATT&CK frameworks, I know that it was oscillating a file. I can also see that it was also tied to a PowerShell that was running, and there was also a fileless attack. It was all the kind of data that I got high level just in a few minutes from right here.
That's all data that's coming in from what's being fed in from Carbon Black and being fed into Splunk. And
correct.
then, yep. And then all of that data, I'm assuming, is just custom presentation using various dashboard techniques to show the data. Is that how that's working?
Correct. That's exactly how it's happening. And we're actually going to go through and look at those because when I go through to show how to set up the dashboards, there's actually one in there since the new versions are not out yet. You actually have to modify. So we'll actually go through and look at that behind the scenes and see how you kind of customize dashboards, which I'm sure you guys have all done, but it's always just a good thing to see.
This
it
is
with
actually really interesting to me because I could use some of the stuff for the MITRE ATT&CK framework tracing and stuff like that, because it's been something that they've been pounding on me to do, but I don't know how much Carbon Black would fit into what we do where I'm at, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, that's something we can always have further conversation too. So always willing to have conversations. And that's the nice thing about security, right? We always work together. So even if it's not something where it's going to help us from a relationship with work, but at least if it just helps security in general, I'm always willing to have those conversations. So feel free to reach out. So what you'll see in here is what's cool about this is because of the way that we have that data that we've always recorded, it allows us to go back in time when we're going through and giving you that process view. So I can actually go back and say, okay, here's where the actual alert happened, but you're actually going to see data that happened before the alerts occurred. So I can click on the command, so I can see command exe, it was kicking off PowerShell. And then what I can see in this case is I know that this was actually a Drupal exploit. So this is the process that the Drupal exploit opens up and is where you can then go through and get admin access. So it will actually allow you to dive from the web server actually all the way down to the application server. You're going to end up having admin access. So I know that's what's going on here just from the attack that I had ran earlier. But again, when you dive in, you'll see all of, on the right-hand side and then down below here on the results, you'll see all the additional metadata that tells you, why it's bad. So any questions on there before I go through and show a couple other things that'll help us understand the dashboard here in a few minutes. All right.
I think what's important to note here too, and I know this is not supposed to be a Carbon Black presentation, but what Carbon Black adds to Splunk is 100% always on recording for every event that happens at the kernel level on the endpoint. So every network call, every file call, every write to disk, everything you can possibly think of that can happen on a workstation is being captured by the Carbon Black agent, and we're sending all that data to Splunk. And from there, you can correlate in Splunk. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that the importance from a security perspective that Carbon Black's offering and why it's so important for that data, as you put it into Splunk.
No, that's an important distinction, because I think that's I think that's a struggle a lot of us who do Splunk admin work struggle with. Is we know the data is there. We know that these process tree tracing items are there in the logs. The problem is, how do we extrapolate those into Splunk? And it looks like Carbon Black is doing that. It's doing that event tracing for you, and then it just is being then dumped into Splunk, which allows that correlation. So I think it is an important distinction.
Yeah, and what you'll see when we start looking at some of the raw logs is it'll actually go through and say, this is the parent process, these are child processes. So that'll all be linked together in the logs when you start following the IDs. So in here, I wanted to go through and make sure you understand. So there's going to be two things we're going to see in the dashboards. There's going to be alerts, and then you're going to have events. So think of the alerts. Those are going to be the higher things that we've gone through and correlated together, knowing that there's a bunch of other events tied to it. And it's gotten to a point where we have a threshold of saying, hey, this is something dangerous we need to look at. And then inside of those alerts, you can have two types of alerts. You can have a watch list. So think of what a watch list is that's where you're going to have some sort of threat feed coming in. You're going to create your own threat feed. So those are things that we classify as watch list. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click the one that says Carbon Black Analytics, and you'll see it'll narrow it down. So these are all the things that we're catching just with our antivirus, our next-gen antivirus policies. But what's really cool in here is we do have options that we could go through and go live with these machines. If we wanted to disable this process, if it was actively running, we can do it from here. If you want to kill it. And if we do kill it, that'll show up in those logs also showing that we killed this process either manually or through our APIs. And again, process trees, making live actual connections, which is something different that we do than others, is you can actually do a live connection no matter if the device is on your corporate network, if it's remote, as long as it has an active internet connection. You can open up a command prompt and go through and run commands, or use our APIs, which is another good spot that you can integrate inside of Splunk, is when you start doing the orchestration. So looking at Phantom and the power you have inside of that, you could tie together with our APIs and actually decide to run an executable, change a registry setting, any of those things you can do just using our APIs with the integration with Phantom. And we looked at investigation a little bit earlier. Again, these are where it's going to be all the way down at the event level instead of at higher level alerts. And then these are the watch lists. So again, this is where you can have any sort of threat feed you want to have coming in. Again, there's lots of different threat feeds that are out there. And the reason why I wanted to show you this is when we're looking at the alerts, you're going to see them summarized by reports, and then you're going to see them as event lists. So this is the higher level list. So you'll see that in the attack framework here, I've had over 9,000 hits, and then I can click on the reports and start seeing these are the type of reports I can hit, and the level of how severe is it when I hit it. And then you'll actually see in Splunk, it's nice that it summarizes and it starts showing you the number of hits you had for all those sub-reports. And what's the cool features about this is sometimes when you get threat feeds, they're a little noisy, so you can actually go through and disable just one part of the report instead of the whole thing, or customize it, make a copy, and tweak it so that you're not getting a bunch of false positives. All right, so with that, I want to show you the API. So you go to Settings, API. This is where you would go through and create your access keys. So what I'm actually going to do now is kind of start going step by step so that you can understand how you'd go through and create these dashboards. And just so you can see it, we do have, this is all the links that I said that we'll go through and share with you guys, so that way you can add it to when you go through and post the video. So you'll see the general SIM. So you have multiple different ways that you can get logs in. So one is you can just get the alerts. If you want to have all the raw event logs, then that's when you're going to go through and use the Splunk event forwarder. So we can go through and forward all those events for you. But again, it's up to your organization if you want all the raw data or just the higher level events that we're already correlating. So this is going to be the Carbon Black add-on. So you actually have to install the Carbon Black Defense add-on before you do the Carbon Black Defense dashboard. Because what it's doing is it's actually setting the configuration, and here's the API I'm going to connect with, and then any additional feeds, you could have multiple feeds in there if you need to or desire to have that. So this is the actual link for the application. And then this is the threat hunter. So again, the threat hunter, that's going to be that you're searching, you're looking at past events or even alerted things that have happened from your watch list, and you want to dive into those deeper. That's going to be that whole focus of using that EDR, that recording functionality. So example, this is what you'll see the dashboard high level look like once you have all the data in. So this is the threat hunter one. This is the defense one. But what I want to do right now is start walking you through how we actually go through and configure it. So you would start with installing the add-on. And I'm going to skip some steps here just because I assume you guys have probably already installed some add-ons before. So again, you would add it just like you would any other add-on. And once you add the add-on, you would go through and click Create New Input. You would just give it a name. We would suggest 60 seconds. Again, the document spells all this out. We would highly suggest that you create your own index, just because that's a best practice so that it's not taking as long to correlate and get all that data to the dashboard. You would put the URL in, and again, all the documents reference which type of URL to put in. And then if you guys want, I can actually give you a document that has examples in here. The API ID. Let me click so you can see what it looks like. And this is just my test data, so I don't feel bad that it's being recorded with my credentials. So you'll see that would be the API ID you would copy in, and that would be your secret. So you would just put those in here and then click add, and it would go through and create the input. And then you would go through and install the dashboard. And then of course, then you'll have the dashboard show up in here. One thing you will need to do is going into settings, advanced search. It's behind the scenes, it's using a macro to make it easier for all those dashboards. So you'll actually have to go in and adjust this macro so it matches what you're wanting to use or search for. So you'll see in here in the example, the default is just saying Carbon Black but you will need to go through and update this so it matches your exact source type depending on how you entered it in the add-in. So when you did the first add-in plugin, this will be the source type data that you'll have to put in.
Is there a harm in leaving it as that default source type? I mean, is it wrong to leave it as the default, or could we just leave it as the default?
Yeah. The problem is going to be with the default because depending on how you name it, chances are it's not going to match, so you'll have no data. So what will happen is, I'll show you what you'll see here.
The reason I asked the question is because if you look at a lot of different apps for Splunk base, they will come with a de facto default source type.
Yes.
And a lot of the instructions will tell you to leave that source type alone.
Yes.
So I wanted to clarify that for the other users that might question that.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. No. And again, that's because on purpose we knew that everyone would want to have a new name scheme, and have it specific for their application because they could have multiple feeds. So because of that, we do set that up so that they can configure it however they'd like to. Let me show you the dashboard here, just so I can show you on the screen what you would see. So what would happen is you're going to end up seeing 0 across everything inside of here. But if you would go to search and do a search, I'll just click here on the data summary. What you'll have is you'll see the hits and the data sources, but you'll just see that the data source doesn't match up to the default name that they had in there. So again, just pick what the correct name source is and put that inside, and you'll be fine for the source type. And what you'll see is it's going to be something notification. Again, just depends on what you ended up naming it for. And I will show one more thing that is one more step we need to do. So inside of defense, you will actually need to come in here and also click setup. So what this is doing is the other setup we did grabs the event logs and the alerts. But what this one is doing is there's some really valuable device information you'll see when we start going through the dashboard. So that's what this setup is for, so it can go through and actively talk and pull using the API that we call it Live Ops API. And what it will do is that's the same one that you could use as an integration to go through and run commands on those devices, no matter where they're at, on network, off network. So you would just come in here and just like you set up another API, you'll put in the URL that's needed. Make sure that you don't put HTTPS because it is assumed because we're automatically going to put it in. So you just need the domain name in there along with the full path. The secret key you would put in, and again, you would put in the API ID and then just click perform setup, and it would set that up for you. All right. For Threat Hunter, again, right now I'm just going through the steps on how to set up the 2 dashboards. For Threat Hunter, once you add the plugin in, it's going to be as simple as coming over to administration, clicking on configuration, and you're just going to click create new Carbon Black Threat Hunter input. And just like before, just really simple of just plugging it in, following the instructions. And what's nice about this one, especially if you leave it as main, everything will automatically work. But again, you can create your own custom indexes. You'll just have to make sure that you update it here and then click save. So what I'm going to start here is showing some of the cool features so that you can start seeing how the data is. So I'm going to start with the overview. Just waiting for some of the data to come back here. Yeah, I have a really slow Splunk server here. It's just a solid state device I have it running on here.
Box.
And it's totally locked up. Nice. We'll give that a second here to
in your defense, though, this isn't Splunk isn't what you do every day. So
No, it is not. So yes, Splunk is a hobby more or less from that perspective. So
right.
Bill Gates USB moment.
What's that?
Bill Gates demonstrating USB moment.
Oh yeah.
Yes, it is. So this is the query that I told you was the second spot you had to set it up. So you'll see that it goes through and shows you all the registered devices. And again, this is just my small test environment, so I only have, I think, 10 devices inside this environment. So what you'll see is it's showing everything here from the US, but if I'd be across the global or global enterprise, you would see those devices connecting in and automatically go through and show that on the map for you. Show you the last contact. So this is just a really nice screen just for inventory. That way you can go through and filter and say, hey, if I had some devices not checking in, so we can focus on those, let the IT teams know that they need to work on these endpoints because they're not working. So we'll go back to the overview here. All right, now it's coming in. So in here, what we will do is we'll click edit because I do want to show you the terminate actions right now because we haven't released the new dashboards. We actually changed the name and the metadata. So because of that, you actually have to come in here and modify it. So just like any other dashboard that's out there, you guys can always customize. So you just come into the widget, customize, edit the search. And all you have to do is it's now called policy hit terminate instead of, before I think it was policy underscore terminate instead of hit. So again, they just did a small name change in there, but I can get you that part of that information in a document also. So this is where I want to go through and start showing you some of the cool things. So in here, think of this as we are giving you all those indicators like you were talking about earlier, is how do I handle all of this for MITRE and start understanding what I'm seeing from a MITRE attack. So right now I'm just going to click example so we can use Splunk to bring all the data back for us. So you'll see, which is nice, is I can go through and use the visualization to have it go through and show it out. But right now I'm just caring about the statistics. But again, high level, it's going to go through and show you, here's the different type of events that I'm seeing, which we were calling reports. So these are the high level reports, here's the account, and then you can dive in and start looking at what's going on and what's happening. So I'm going to go through and click on PowerShell just so we can see what that looks like. Because I really want you guys to start seeing some of this raw data. So you'll see the device info, you'll see the ID, you'll see the device name, you'll see who it was registered to, IP addresses, group name, so what policy is it a member of, the last IP address when it was checking in for this event, the event description, the threat hold, the threat info, you can go through and start building out. So this is where you'll see all the indicators that we automatically tied to it. So we know that this is MITRE ATT&CK T1086 for PowerShell is what it's hitting. And again, it's also hitting bypass policy. So again, there's going to be lots of attributes in here that all tie and give you that additional context that we're automatically building for you. You'll see the risk score, the threat cause, and then this one did not have a parent to it, but if it did, there would be an additional section that you'd break out in the JSON that would go through and show you the parent ID. So I know I've done a lot of talking up to this point, so I wanted to pause for a second, see if there's any questions or things you guys want me to dive into deeper before I continue.
No, it seems pretty straightforward. It's useful from my perspective. I find the information interesting. So
yeah, well, what I always am impressed with is the amount of data that we really have that you don't even realize when you're looking at our dashboards. But when you start, exporting it into Splunk, where we send all the raw data, that's where you really see the amount of power that we have behind it.
yeah, and you see just how much exhaust all the systems are putting off, and you don't realize it until you're collecting it all.
Oh, yes, exactly. So again, what's really cool in here also is you'll see that we do have links to the console. So that's what's nice about this is when you guys do have a correlation, you could go through and send this to the SOC team, and the SOC team will be able to open it up inside the Carbon Black dashboard. And then if they need to, they can take manual actions if that's how you're doing it. Or again, you can grab all the same data, and then using our APIs, you can use Phantom to go through and create full orchestration and automation if you guys want to do that. High level, again, this is just what it's showing. It's just showing you the information by application, just like it sounds like. And again, that's where you can, just like any other dashboard, click search, get all the raw events, and do your additional correlations you want. Fireless attacks, that's one of those things that most everyone's going to focus on, because that is the majority of the attacks that are happening now, because they are doing it fireless, because your traditional AV is not going to find it. So it requires a next-gen antivirus. So you will see there's a lot of threats out there that are using fireless attacks. And then it's always nice to know that, hey, here's the things we've actually blocked from the Carbon Black side in this case. Saying, hey, we did block 6 things, which were all, when we dive into it and look, you'll see they're all tied back to those fireless attacks that we had set as denies. So this is actually my favorite dashboard out of the two, because I really think the threat hunter is, it's a lot of fun. Plus, with the customizations you start doing with watch list, it gives you a lot of flexibility so that you can really dive into the data and see it from different angles. So high level here, I'm just going to click and look at the watch list. And again, just like what this is before, this is that high level. So this would tie one-to-one with what we had over here in our watch list. So these would be the watch list names, and you would see these numbers would match what you're seeing over here. And then up here, the indicator, this is where it's going to be breaking it down further. And what this would be the equivalent of is what we classify as the report. So you would see all these names tie up one-to-one for what you're seeing over here. And this is where you really start seeing a lot of that value. Because you'll see right here, I've already got 20 on this page is what I have the max set up for viewing. And you'll see that we have 20 different types of activities. So credentials in the file. So again, all those negative things that you typically wouldn't want to do. So all those alert things. And the nice thing is, because we have that recorded data back to 30 days, if you make a new watch list, you can check a box saying, go back and make all those alerts that would have occurred with this new rule set. So we will go through and create those, and then we will forward them. If you have the APIs configured, they'll automatically get forward, or the event forwarders will automatically send it into Splunk so that you'll get that data as you guys are making changes. So again, what we're trying to do is think of it as the Swiss Army knife. So we're trying to give you guys all the flexibility, the power, so you can use the tool as strong as you want or as far as you want. And then on top of Splunk, you guys can take that data even further than what we open and expose just inside of our tool. Host, just like it says, pretty self-explanatory. Again, it's just showing you here's the different threats by the top 10 hosts. Again, my environment, I don't have enough to go through and have all those, but you'll see here's some of the ones that I had kicked off some alerts for here. And then, of course, breakdown by application. Policy action overview. This is where I like it. Actually goes through and starts showing you what policies are hit. In here, which is something that a threat hunter would really kick out and look at. And again, I know that not everyone here is a threat hunter, but when you start seeing cert utility using things, especially when it starts doing irregular network connections, like in here, when we go through and start looking at this, we'll see it actually went out to GitHub. So those are some of the things that really flag that, hey, something's going on. So it looks like something's trying to use cert utility to go through and download some malware, or use it as an application as a jumping point. So you'll see the number of policy actions hit, again, the top host. In here, you'll only see Windows today, just because all the threats I kicked off are on Windows, but it will show Windows, Mac. As we're going through and building in the Kubernetes piece with Octane, it explode all the way over to there. And then this also includes any cloud, any device, just because that's part of the VMware goal of where we're going with Carbon Black, is that we'll have that security layer wrapped around no matter where your devices are, because we know you need to protect it, in the changing world you have, which is a combination of cloud, local infrastructure, and containers.
Yeah, Linux as well, of course.
Yes. Yep. Linux also. Policy actions. These are going to be the actions that are typically automatically happening from the next gen antivirus. But again, it's just good to go through and see that we give you that data so that you'll know what policy group was in there. And again, you have multiple different ways to assign those policies. If you're using orchestration with Phantom, you can assign it using an API. Inside of Carbon Black, we give you all the typical things. So it could be an AD group, registry settings, any sort of combination file you're looking for. Any of those different ways, IP address range, we can go through and set policies and keep that for you. And you'll see in here the example of what was happening. So I did an example of actually killing Notepad. So you'll see that I actually went through and used the interface to terminate Notepad. And here you'll see cert utility where it was hitting, it was trying to go out to GitHub. You'll see this example here with PowerShell was actually trying to go and reach into other parts of memory it shouldn't have access to, and then run a fileless attack. So again, a lot of data that you could dive into and just spend hours just talking about each one of these different use cases and what that data looks like. And just because it's my test environment is the reason I'm going for a wider window. But again, all these things, just like any other dashboard, click on it, get to that raw data as far as you guys need to. And again, high level, we're telling you what policy it's in, all the same sort of data, but this time it's actually tying it to an incident. So if you'd open that incident up, you would see all the related events and alerts that are tied to that one specific incident. What I also really like about the Threat Hunter overview is the fact that we do give you the health overview, so you can actually see the last time it kind of checked in, the number of events it's pulled in, the number of errors. And right now I should have kicked off some alerts, but you'll see there hasn't been any in the last 24 hours because I was trying not to change too much of this as we were moving on. But for now, I'll do a quick feed here to force in some logs. So we'll go back and look at that in a little bit. Usage, this is where, especially as you go through and set up other users, you're going to actually see who are the top users, are they really in there, and then what parts of the dashboard are they using, and where are they really focusing on and day in and day out. So again, it's just that power of Splunk. So going through and taking that data, letting you guys correlate it and use it in any manner you want. So we give you the basic dashboards, the basic building blocks that you guys can expand it and make custom things. So one of the example things that hopefully it gets added with the new version we're coming along, but if not, what I would actually do is would be copy the Threat Hunter indicator breakdown, and I would actually allow you to go through and filter on so that you could select attack framework and then have it just show you on that grid of here's all of the different attacks just related to attack framework. So again, that would just be a real easy thing of just copying our code that's in there and then just adding another variable where the user just selects, you know, which one of the watch lists they want to narrow it down to. So with that, any specific questions? Anything you guys want to dive into deeper?
I don't have anything specifically. I appreciate what you've shown us so far. It looks useful and nice to see that you can correlate. I think the thing that I liked the most was where you showed the one event that you can correlate back to all of the other events. Couple of the searches you did just a few minutes ago. Yeah. So I think that would be that for me would be one of the more useful things.
Okay.
Being able to tie that single event back and see all of the different items that tied into that single event or incident.
Yep. Yeah, and that is really the power. That's part of the reason why we know that we need to give you guys that data, because we do understand that you want to start looking at this and say, okay, do we see the same process running on other devices? Are there other patterns? And again, that's why we're giving you all that data, and so you can see how everything is interrelated, so that you can go through and either tweak policies if it's a false positive, or if it is something that's really something dangerous you need to look at, so you know how far your scope is that you need to go through and investigate.
Well, if they don't add that additional dashboard item to allow you to, you know, grab the watch list or anything, let me know after the new version comes out.
Okay.
And I'll modify the dashboards and send it back to you, and then you can do with it as you please, because that's an easy enough change. Like I'm looking at it and already mentally I went, I know exactly how I would change the code to do that. Like I haven't even seen the code for it, but just generally knowing SPL the way I do,
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I know how I could do that.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things when I was prepping for this today, I was like, man, why didn't I go ahead and make my custom one and just mark it Shawn's dashboard and saying,
Right.
hey, here's the additional dashboard. But again, that's what I like about this is like most everything we do in the tool is we want to leave it open and give everyone the flexibility to use it in a way that they find useful. So.
Right. And I like the way that you guys make a lot of use of macros specifically for Splunk, because that makes it easy as an admin. You know, if you want to make a change, you don't have to make a change in 10 different dashboards.
Yeah.
You make a change in that one macro, and you know, let's say you've got a specific piece that you want to focus on, and that macro does most of what you want it to, but maybe you want another field to be included that's not included by default or something of that nature. You can go and modify that single macro,
Yes.
and then it changes it across the board rather than, you know, modifying each individual spot. So I appreciate your development efforts in that area, or whoever developed.
Correct. Yeah, no, and that's one of the things I really appreciated was the macros. As soon as I saw it was configured using the macros, I'm like, oh, this is going to make it easy as long as you remember to go in and change the macro if your index doesn't match.
Right.
Your source. So again, it makes it nice because for the index, they leave it star. But again, just for best practice, if you guys do use special indexes, again, I would highly recommend it just because it's going to make your searches faster. So I do suggest go in and use a custom index so that you can make those dashboards a lot faster.
And don't leave it as default, because default is main and nobody likes main index.
Exactly. Yes.
So, but I don't have any other questions. I didn't see any other in the chat.
Okay.
So did you have other items you wanted to cover on this, or?
No, I mean, I was trying to just leave it high level for in case people had questions we can dive into. But again, I mean, I thought high level, I was hoping what you guys wanted is just to understand how the dashboard works, how you can get the threat feed into it, what kind of data you have, and then just another example of dashboards for those of you that are in there creating your own dashboard.
Okay.
So.
Shawn, do you have a slide you can throw up just to share our contact details? I don't know if you have one of those pre-made.
No, but I can put something up real quick.
Yeah, just so on the recording here, if anybody watches the recording afterwards, or if there's anybody on now that wants to contact us, they'll have a way to get a hold of us.
Okay.
So I got a quick question for you guys, if that's set. It looked like you were pulling the data through the API from your cloud install. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that is correct.
So the ingest on these is actually through that API instead of the Carbon Black agents on machines.
Correct.
So I'm assuming that would make the ingest very limited. Where I'm getting at is, right, Splunk likes to bill by ingest, so the smaller the better.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have an option, right? And that's part of why we give you multiple different ways to ingest that data. So by default, just our typical APIs that you're going to be using is going to be all the high level data. So the events, the alerts, the metadata tied to those events and alerts. But then when you do the forwarder, then if you want, you guys can open that forwarder up and its configuration, right, is wide open. So if you do wide open, then you'll get all those raw events. So again, that can be fairly chatty. So it just depends on your guys' use case and if you want all that raw data or not. But we do give you the option that you can have anywhere from high level to full information as granular as we can get. So one thing that we are doing, which I kind of want to build on that just so people understand what we're doing, is with our agents, something that we do different than most other things out there is we purposely do not filter that data. So what we do is we pump it up to our cloud. So you'll see that we actually have a lot of raw events that others won't have. So a lot of, especially EDRs, they wait until something triggers and then start recording. But we are actually pumping that data up. So we go through and kind of compress it and then send it up at our check-in time intervals up to the cloud so that we have all that raw data so that when you're going through and finding events or changing watch lists, that way you can actually have a true watch list, and we can tell you here, this watch list, though it's brand new, it would have actually found something if you would have had it in your environment 20 days ago, because 20 days ago you would have had a match for that new watch list. So again, we're sending, think of it as raw logs. There's very few things that we're filtering out and not sending up to our cloud.
Okay, so let me play the devil's advocate then.
Yes.
So you're saying then I've got endpoint data, endpoint information that's going into a cloud environment hosted by Carbon Black.
Yep. So what you're going to have in there, there's going to be some of the things that we do obfuscate on purpose. So think of it as there's going to be hash values. There's going to be those other things that you typically that are not as higher risk as the data that we have. And then we do have options and policies that if you have PII or PCI kind of information that you want to filter out, you can check a policy that says not to update that and load it to the cloud. The downside with that, right, is then you're not getting our full AI when we're going through and tuning and making alerts.
Right.
So that's the downside of it, but we do allow you to filter that out if you don't want to go into the cloud.
Okay. I just, working in the financial space, it's always the first thing. Anytime they hear, oh, we're going to put this in the cloud, they go, well.
Yep, and that's where we do have lots of documents if there's questions where we go through and show, here's our security around it, here's the things we're sending, and here's the options you guys have to filter the data the way that you want to send up to the cloud.
Okay.
So that's a conversation we have a lot, and we're really good at sending those documents if anyone needs to see those.
Okay. Yeah, I just had to play the devil's advocate for a minute.
Oh yeah, no, you're good.
If I didn't, my fellow financial sector people would.
If they watch the
hit me with
recording
something.
later, yes, they will hunt you down. I totally understand. Yeah, so quickly, I went ahead and let me zoom in this a little bit further. But in case you guys do want to contact us, I'm Shawn Altman. Chad is the other person from VMware here. So again, our contact information is there for you guys to reach out if you have any questions. And again, feel free, we can dive in. There's lots of really good community services that are open for Carbon Black customers that are out there. So people go through and make their own searches and dashboards on top of what we have, but these are all the corporate created Carbon Black ones that we looked at today. So any other questions? I love having questions.
Dustin, let me ask a question for you. How can we continue to support the Splunk user group community?
We're, as we go back to normalcy, we usually look for sponsors for, in-person events. Outside of that, just spread the word amongst your accounts and things. Let them know, hey, there's a local Splunk user group. That's the biggest thing I could ask, honestly. I ask for that more than I ask for sponsoring events. Tell your accounts that, would use Splunk. Hey, there's this local user group. Go check it out. If you have questions, go there and ask. Working on trying to get the Slack channel reinstated. I don't know what's going on with that. That somebody else controls that at the moment. I'm still trying to figure that out. So, that's the biggest ask. Just spread the word. I can provide you the direct link to the user group page if you don't have it already. Just spread the word, make sure people know about it. We do the meetings are consistently the third Tuesday of each month at 6 o'clock. So there's that consistency there as far as the meetings. So feel free to tell people that's when they are. That's the biggest support I could ask for.
Okay. Do you upload these videos to be watched later?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you give me the links, they just launched a new platform, so I'll have to figure out exactly how to get added, but I know that I can add it. So
okay, it'll come as an MP4.
That's fine. That should be fine. If there's any issue with that, I'll let you know, but there shouldn't be.
Okay, very good.
Perfect. Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll get with you also because I can get on our Cloud Security Alliance. We've been trying to go through and capture all the events that we know going on. So it might make sense to add you that calendar too so that people can see it.
That would be great. I try to get us added to as many event calendars as I can. So
perfect.
And I'd like to talk to you about the Cloud Security Alliance anyway. So
okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'll give you a call later. So.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to Carbon Black and to Chad and Shawn for presenting. Thank you to everyone else for attending who is here. And to anyone who's watching this virtually later, thank you for watching and hope you have a good evening.
Very good. Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.